Hi, I'm so sorry. So we can actually start, and we'll be starting with um, a short description of our our guest speaker. So Dr. Catherine is the Executive Director for the African Network for Animal Welfare. She holds an MSc in Global Social Change and a scholarship-funded PhD in Sociology from the University of Edinburgh, with a focus on global development practice and regenerative education. Over the last several years, she has worked as a lecturer and researcher at the University of Edinburgh, a policy researcher for the Scottish government, and is a non-profit co-founder and director in both Scotland and the US. From this short bio, you would actually realize that Dr. Catherine is very vast in various aspects of veterinary medicine, animal welfare, and today she'll be talking to us about the role of veterinarians and veterinary students in promoting animal welfare and animal rights. So without further ado, I would hand over to Dr. Catherine to begin our presentation. So sorry, I hope I'm actually pronouncing your name right. So I'll stop sharing now, and yes, you should be able to share your screen now. Thank you. Sorry. How about now? Can you hear now? Can you unmute yourself now?
There we go. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
And Miriam, pronouncing my name correctly. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you all today and for that generous introduction. I'm actually quite pleased that it's a small group because it's nice every now and then when you're used to speaking to big audiences to just have a group of 15 to 20 people so we can have a conversation after my presentation and to make sure everybody has a chance to ask any questions that they might have. And I'd also just like to preface this by saying how fantastic I think it is that you all have taken the initiative to have this symposium and that you have this student association that allows you to explore all these other areas and fields that are related to veterinary medicine and veterinary practice. So without further ado, I'll just jump right in. Miriam, can you just confirm that you can see my screen okay? Yes? Okay,
yes.
Great. Excellent. So we'll start here. Why veterinary students matter in the promotion of animal welfare and animal rights. I'm Dr. Catherine Baxter. As Miriam said, I'm the Executive Director of the African Network for Animal Welfare USA. Our sister organization is the African Network for Animal Welfare based in Nairobi, Kenya. So with that context, we'll jump in. So from my view, veterinary students can make a huge difference for animals in a variety of ways. These are just some that I've sketched out that were at the top of my mind. And whilst I'm not a veterinarian, both my parents are veterinarians and I work really closely with veterinarians in all the work that I do for the African Network for Animal Welfare. And I have a tremendous respect for the profession and for people who decide to devote their lives to helping animals. And so just to also preface this by saying, I'll just be calling you veterinarians from now on, confident that you'll all finish your studies and that there won't be any need to distinguish between veterinary students and veterinarians. So before I get into some of the specific ways that I think veterinarians globally, not just in the United States or Kenya or Nigeria, but globally can make a difference, I think it's important to distinguish between animal welfare and animal rights so that we know what we're talking about and the kind of different strands of philosophy underpinning different practical approaches to furthering the causes of animal welfare and animal rights. So animal welfare refers to the well-being of non-human animals and the prevention of human-inflicted suffering. It allows for the consumption and use of animals as long as humane standards of treatment are met. This is different from animal rights, which is a framework that goes further to assert that animals have individual rights similar to human beings, and therefore they're not for human use or consumption, including for food, clothing, entertainment, or experimentation. So those are two strands of thought, and you'll find that a lot of organizations that advocate on behalf of animals fall somewhere between them, or on either side of these kind of concepts and philosophies. At ANOW, we take the animal welfare route, recognizing that there are some ways in which, in some instances in which it's acceptable for non-human animals to be used for human consumption as long as humane standards of treatment are maintained. I think as veterinarians, this is a kind of decision for all of you to think about, and to think about where you fall on this spectrum in terms of how we think about human relationships to animals. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything important. Excellent. Okay, you can still hear me. Moving on to the next point of the presentation. One thing I think that's sometimes undervalued in what you all do as veterinarians and veterinary students is the interpretation that you do of animal needs. So the diversity of animal needs are, I mean, that's a vast plane, and obviously different veterinarians will have different specialties. I know in the United States, it's more common for veterinarians to specialize in domestic and companion animals, whereas my colleagues in Kenya, there's less of a distinction made between domestic, companion, wild, and farmed animals in your training. But that said, animals are all incredibly unique, and each species of animals is also very, very much unique. So you serve a very wide range of non-human animals, and it requires a lot of skill, a lot of nuance, a lot of empathy to interpret the needs of other creatures. And I just think that's a really unique contribution that veterinarians can make to all of our efforts towards animal welfare and animal rights that needs to be kind of more acknowledged than it is. Furthermore, veterinarians are instrumental and often key components of designing and setting animal welfare standards across the globe to ensure the proper treatment of animals in a variety of settings. So that could be for setting the standards of, farm animals. Let's say there's live transport. Veterinarians are instrumental in making sure that animal welfare standards are maintained, that the animal isn't experiencing any kind of harm or suffering in those processes. Zoos, wildlife management facilities, all of these bring veterinarians into the picture to kind of determine what's in the best interest of animals. So you all have a unique privilege and responsibility to make sure that the highest levels of animal welfare and animal rights, depending on where you fall in that conversation, are maintained, and that animals have advocates who are professionals who have the kind of credentials to say, no, this is not in the animal's best interest. Veterinarians can also act as advocates for the compassionate treatment of animals, obviously, and unite themselves to speak out and take action against those who mistreat animals. Oftentimes veterinarians will be the front lines, or the first person that can really identify when there are incidences of animal mistreatment or animal harm being perpetrated. And so you all have the opportunity to take action, to really make sure that animals aren't being kept in situations or conditions that aren't in their interest. And not many other people or individuals in the animal welfare and animal rights field are in that position, because we're not practitioners, we're not doctors, we're not intervening directly on their behalf. So always keep that in mind, that you are their advocate. And if you aren't an advocate, then it's hard to think of who else will be for specific animals that you come in contact with. Moving on to animal care and compassion. This is one of I think the most important parts of the work that we do, and one of the most kind of inspiring instances of how veterinarians can make a difference. We at the African Network for Animal Welfare USA host, in coordination with our colleagues in Nairobi, veterinary service trips where we hold rabies vaccination, animal care, spay and neuter, and various types of animal care clinics throughout rural Kenya. And everyone, it's easy to think that the most important work that we're doing there is providing rabies vaccinations or flea and tick medication or dewormers. But actually, one of the most important things I think we're doing there is modeling and showing the compassionate treatment of these animals who oftentimes will be dragged long distances on ropes, or cats will be brought in bags, and you can just tell that there's a sort of different way of relating to the suffering or to the well-being of the animals. And so what our team does, and they're a mix of local Kenyan veterinarians and international veterinarians who come to volunteer their time for these trips, is to slow down, show the benefits of treating each animal with compassion and with care, of stroking a dog, of making sure they're not fearful of the injection that's about to come, and of really just making sure that we're not rushing when there's a line of 50 people to get their animals vaccinated. We're not rushing through modeling that really, really important compassionate treatment of animals. And that opens up a new way of relating to and seeing these animals, I think, especially for the kids that bring their dogs and their cats and their donkeys to us. And that's really incredibly important. And there's a lot of change that's made in those small interactions. So keeping that in mind. And also that your existence as veterinarians asserts the fact that other animals have intrinsic value and they are worthy of moral consideration. The discipline of veterinary medicine, I think, is incredibly noble and humble. And the fact that we have people who devote their lives to caring for and providing high-level medical treatment to other species, other creatures, just says a lot about who we are as humans and the moral considerations that we give to other species. You also have the knowledge and expertise to provide life-saving and preventative care to animals. And without this care, they have no other recourse. So I have a tremendous amount of respect and humility for all of the skills and expertise that veterinarians and veterinary students can bring to an interaction with an animal that is obviously in pain or suffering, to provide kind of diagnostic care and to be able to alleviate that suffering. Whereas me as a non-veterinarian looking at an animal suffering, I wouldn't really know where to begin. So never underestimate the skills that you bring and how much that can mean to any individual animal life. Veterinarians are also individuals who you devote yourselves to the well-being of those creatures that are the least able to advocate for themselves, which again, I think is incredibly noble, and it says a lot about who you are as individuals and as people, that you choose to devote your professional lives to care for those that are the most vulnerable among us. So I try to do that in a different way. I didn't like taking biology in my undergraduate, so maybe that's why I steered away from veterinary medicine. But I think everybody has a unique contribution to make towards this cause, towards caring for the most vulnerable among us. And you all have chose to do that through veterinary medicine. Next, I'll get into a kind of framework and a philosophy that we really try to embody at ANOW USA, which is the One Health, One Welfare approach. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with it. I hope so. If not, yes, I see Miriam nodding, so that's fantastic. This is an image that a friend of mine designed that I just thought was beautiful. It kind of highlights the ways in which we're all connected to other creatures of this planet and to the other living systems on this planet as well. So you're at the front lines of better understanding specifically how the health of all living creatures and the living systems on this planet are inextricably interconnected. Something I think we're becoming more and more aware of every few years, hopefully before it's too late. So obviously with COVID-19 and other pandemics, we know that zoonotic diseases will continue to be a threat to human societies and to animal species. And veterinarians are kind of in a unique intermediary position to understand this transmission. And you also have the expertise to identify and help reduce the likelihood of transmission. And that's incredibly important. I know my dad was the director of a veterinary school and had a few rabies cases somehow slip through the door through people keeping raccoons as pets, if you can believe it. Totally crazy. And luckily there was, veterinarians and people who could clearly identify those symptoms, who knew exactly what protocols to put in place, how to manage that. And so there was no outbreak and no transmission, no further transmission. But if it had been in any other instance or any other situation without veterinary expertise to identify that, it might have been a different scenario. And so that's incredibly important. Veterinarians also act as leading proponents of One Health and One Welfare philosophy. And this is, we embody it through our work, is a kind of approach and also a framework for developing solutions to issues that are challenging humans, animals, and the environment, that aims to improve the quality of life for all conscious creatures through trying to have a deeper understanding of our entwined existences. So how one thing in one community impacts the other creatures and the other natural living systems existing amongst that. So I can't stress this philosophy enough in terms of just, I think it's already taken hold pretty significantly in veterinary medicine circles. It's still slowly transmitting and translating over to human medicine. And I think it's also now trickling into a lot of global development, a lot of animal welfare and animal rights practitioners and nonprofits that are trying to draw these important connections that I think are essential if we're actually going to develop meaningful solutions to challenges facing animal welfare. So with that, I'm gonna, I have kept it fairly brief, which I hope is a good thing because it allows for more time for questions. I'm going to end with this quote from one of my favorite authors, Milan Kundera. Mankind's true moral test, its fundamental test, which lies deeply buried from view, consists of its attitude towards those who are at its mercy, animals. And in this respect, mankind has suffered a fundamental debacle, a debacle so fundamental that all others stem from it. And I'll just leave you to think on that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I'll also just highlight, this is our website. You can go to www.annowusa.org and you can follow us on all social media channels. And if you want to get in touch directly to learn more about our work or how you can get involved, you can shoot us an email at info@annowusa.org. And so now, if it's appropriate, I will open up the floor for questions and just say thank you all for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Katrin. That was a very wonderful presentation. And I kind of like the way it's kind of like short, but you actually get the message. So like she said, if you have any questions, you can either type it in the chat box or raise your hand and I would unmute you so you can ask. Thank you. So just give a few minutes for questions.
Oh, I think I just got, oh, it wasn't a question. It's just a message. And if you would prefer not to speak, that's okay. You can chat. You can send me a message or a question in the chat and I will answer it. That's absolutely fine as well.
Yes.
Miriam, while we're waiting, do you mind if I just ask you, what's your experience been as a veterinary student and where you're at in your studies currently?
Okay, yes. So in my final year in Nigeria, it's like a 6 years course. So I'm in my sixth year. And it has been a very wonderful experience so far for me. I have learned to love veterinary medicine. Like it's something I'm actually very passionate about. I love interacting with different animals. I and I've kept pets too. I've raised a rabbit once, and I currently have a pet, a cat. Sorry. So yeah, it's been wonderful. It's very stressful, but it's been a wonderful experience so far. So
Yeah, I'm sure it's challenging. 6 years is a long time.
yeah.
Do you know which type of animal or veterinary medicine you want to focus on when you leave in terms of your professional aspirations? Wild animals, domestic, or is there not such a clear delineation in Nigeria?
Well, it's like along the way you kind of like pick what you're interested in, and if you're not interested in any, you can continue to like develop it just along the way. But for me, I think I'm leaning towards public health or poultry medicine, and yeah, either of the two. So we have somebody raising up her hands, Sekina. So do you want to try to unmute yourself, please, so that we can hear your question? Thank you.
Yes, and also maybe before we give Sakina a chance to think and maybe type in her question if she would rather. I just see that in the chat that is Abdul Hakim Aziz has entered a question. So I'll read that out and then I'll respond to that. And then maybe we can move to the next question if that works for everybody. So in your experience over the years, what would you regard as the major challenge faced, especially in Africa, when it comes to animal welfare? Which is a great question. And I think some of the most persistent and what seem to be intractable problems facing animal welfare and animals is when economic incentives go directly against the welfare of animals and the kind of preservation of their well-being. This takes shape in different forms on different continents and in different countries. So for example, in Kenya, a lot of the work that we do is to try to reduce the hunting and the trade of bushmeat and also the hunting, illegal wildlife trafficking. So there's a market, right? There are economic incentives that are leading people to hunt, to slaughter, to poach, to trade animals and animal parts for various reasons. And that's a really pernicious problem because as long as there's the demand, it's really hard to cut off or to create solutions that sufficiently target the root of that problem. Another example in Kenya is the donkey skin trade, which is again being fueled by economic incentives for abattoirs that operate in Kenya and through a demand in China for a traditional Chinese medicine that's derived from donkey skins, which is called Ijiao. And that has led to really astronomical numbers of donkeys being stolen from local communities and from individuals and then slaughtered and then sold to China to satiate this market. And when the slaughterhouses are trying to stay open and the people that are involved in the slaughter are trying to earn money, right, as a livelihood, it's hard to create interventions that sufficiently target what's motivating those threats to animal welfare. So I think making those connections again, and it's a sort of similar point, and it falls into this one health and welfare philosophy. Unless we recognize what's driving the human behavior that is creating threats to animal welfare, then we probably are unlikely to get to the root of some of these problems. So thank you for that question. I hope I answered it sufficiently. I see one more question here in the chat. That might be the easiest way, so everyone can just maintain their anonymity and just listen comfortably from wherever you are. In our part of the world, there are times clients refuse veterinarians from treating their animals due to possibly their ignorance. What do we do as veterinarians in this situation? That's a really difficult question because obviously, I think one of the things that makes veterinary medicine most difficult is you're not only often dealing with the animal, you also have to deal with the people that are involved and surrounding the animal or the animals. And so, there are obviously ethical guidelines and ethical practices that you have to keep in mind when you're trying to intervene on the behalf of an animal. Different places will have different kind of procedures depending on, for example, in the United States, if a client or an owner of an animal is visibly neglecting them, then you can report that and then you can intervene on the animal's behalf. Whereas I know that's different in different parts of the world, but potentially also in West Africa. So I think all you can do is try to appeal to their sense of reason, their empathy for the animal, and without any other avenue to intervene, you kind of have to respect the owner's wishes, whilst also trying to convince them at the same time of the importance of veterinary medicine. It's I don't envy you being in that situation, put it that way.
Thank you. So I can see Sekina's hand again. Sekina, do you want to type a question in the chat? And if you would still like to ask, you can always ask. Meanwhile, I also want to ask a question. So in your experience as a veterinary doctor and animal welfare advocate, what is will I say the worst animal welfare situation that you've ever seen? And how were you able to handle it?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And I will just, again, remind, I'm unfortunately not trained as a veterinary doctor, but I have been kind of in the front lines of a lot of different challenging animal welfare cases. The one that comes to mind is when we were, this past summer, we were conducting a rabies vaccination clinic near Kasagao in Kenya. And there were, different communities have different ways of relating to animals. And this particular spot that we were that day, you could just tell there was a trend and a kind of cultural attitude that was not very friendly or kind towards the animals that they were trying to bring to get vaccinated and cared for. So we had a person actually drag their dog to the point almost of suffocation on a rope. And as soon as we recognized what was happening, we had to run down the dirt road and intervene and try to, convince the person to let go of the rope. And then we had to sever the rope because it was so tightly wound around the dog's neck that it was almost impossible to just take it off. And the dog, was showing visible signs of suffocation. So we were able to remove the rope, and the dog was luckily okay. But had it been, 30 seconds later, a minute later, then in trying to get that dog to our clinic to receive care, the dog would have died. And it's when someone can't look and see that the animal is suffering, when the owner is dragging their dog down the road and can't see and understand or empathize to the point where it could recognize the amount of suffering being inflicted, it's really hard to then try to teach and model the that type of relationship to an animal moving forward. So whilst we were able to save the animal in that instance and provide vaccination and food and water and dewormer, obviously we were all concerned about what would happen next and how the man was planning to get the dog home. And I think the hardest part is you do what you can when you can, but there's so much that's outside of your control when you're not interfacing with the animals.
Thank you. So we have one more question. Sekina says, do you have any plan of extending the activities of your organization to Nigeria, or probably collaborate with another organization here in Nigeria?
Yeah, excellent question. We are always trying to expand. I think the African Network for Animal Welfare, is very deliberately included in the name. Primarily right now we have projects in East Africa, although there was just the annual Animal Welfare Conference in Accra, Ghana, that was just in September. And I know it depends on the types of projects that are proposed, the types of collaborations that are proposed, whether it fits within our current capacity, or whether it's something that we can see expanding our mission and vision to a different region. But yes, absolutely. I think there is interest to expand our activities to Nigeria. And I would encourage you to send me an email or visit our website and get in touch, and we can discuss that potential further. Thanks for asking. And I would maybe also just ask back to you before I answer Janice's question, whether, I guess, what types of activities you think Nigeria and potentially the veterinary practitioners in the area would be most interested in collaborating on. And you could also include that in your email. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Next question. What do you do in a scenario whereby you are trying to tell people about respecting animal rights and welfare, and they tell you something like, you eat chicken and other meat, don't you? Yeah, good question. So I think every dietary decision is a personal one, and there are still ways to be animal advocates and animal welfare proponents while still eating chicken and meat. It all depends on where you get those products from and the standards that they're raised and reared in, and whether or not you can verify with full transparency that certain animal welfare standards are maintained. In the United States, it is very difficult, I think, to, in the supply chain, disentangle whether or not animals and animal products, whether meat, dairy, or otherwise, are coming from places where animals are treated well and to the highest welfare standards. And I personally don't eat meat. Every now and then I will eat eggs, and I don't eat dairy, mostly because I have made a personal decision, and that I do not extend or judge anybody else on the same basis, that a lot of the challenges facing animals, whether wildlife due to ecosystem and biodiversity loss because of the huge amount of land that's needed to raise animals to meet the demand for meat, or other animal welfare issues related to factory farming, or just the inhumane treatment of animals whenever there is a profit to be made from selling them and their exploitation. It's a difficult choice to make, but I think, again, there are ways to ethically eat meat, and I don't think it makes you a hypocrite. I just think it's a question you should look into further, and it's something you should, pay very careful attention to in terms of where the meat or the animals that you're consuming are coming from. My parents eat fish. They're both veterinarians. For a long time, they ate chicken and beef. It's a matter of personal decision and whether you feel good about the welfare standards underpinning your consumption choices. Thank you for that question. I think that's an important one, and one that we all can make people uncomfortable because it's so personal, but it's really, really important that we talk about that, as it is a big contributor to animal suffering. Yeah, thank you. Excellent questions, I must say.
Hi, Rodia, do you want to talk? Oh, I saw a hand raised. Sorry, I thought she wanted to talk. I have one question too. So, are there like student organizations or organizations that kind of like provide internship opportunities that are kind of like related to animal welfare that you are aware about?
Yes. In which region are you referencing? In the United States, in East Africa, West Africa?
We can, how about both of them? Just
Yeah, all of them. Okay. Yes, I know there are many organizations working around the world on issues of animal welfare and animal rights. The biggest ones that come to mind are kind of World Animal Protection. I know Wildlife Direct is very active in East Africa, African Network for Animal Welfare in East Africa, always looking for interns. I'm also at USA, always interested in people who would like to support our work on the ground. So people who can be representatives of the African Network for Animal Welfare in their respective communities. So if you're interested in that and in volunteering, please let me know. I think it depends on what your focus is, whether you want to focus on wildlife, whether you want to focus on farmed animals, whether you want to focus on domestic and companion animals. But IFAW is a really good organization, Humane Society International, RSPCA, the list goes on. So I think if you do a simple Google search for animal welfare organizations, animal rights organizations, you will find a long list of opportunities to get involved, and you can choose kind of what's most in alignment with your particular interests. Yes, unfortunately, I don't know if there's a lot of paid internships. I wish there were more of them, but always opportunities to volunteer, of course.
Thank you. Okay, so does any other person have any question? While we wait, I would like to introduce our chair of standing committee on event planning, Aziz Abdulakim. He has been the one that has been contacting you most of the time throughout the whole organization, and he has been very wonderful. So Aziz, do you want to maybe say something? Maybe he's having network issues.
Me here today.
Sorry, what? I didn't get that.
Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Catherine. It's a pleasure having you here.
Oh, I think there's a slight delay.
Yeah, I didn't get that too.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I said thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Catherine. It's really wonderful having you here today.
Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here. And thanks for all your fantastic questions and for all the work that you're doing on behalf of the animals in your own lives and in your own ways. Unfortunately, I have another meeting starting at 11:15, so I will have to jump off the call, but please, I encourage anyone who is interested in our work or just would like to have a follow-up conversation to shoot me an email. I'll put the website of our organization in the chat so you can find it. And just continue your excellent work. And thanks again to the conference, the symposium organizers for inviting me.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to listen to you, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone here too did as well. Do have a lovely day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.
Okay, so everyone, thank you so much for attending today's symposium. Another one will be taking place tomorrow, 8 p.m. this time around, and hopefully we'll have more participants than today. I would also like to mention that for you to qualify to get a certificate, you have to attend at least 3 of our 3 sessions, and we're having 4. So just put that in mind. The other topics that we shall be talking about tomorrow, we shall be focusing on antimicrobial resistance, and basically we'll be having Dr. Odetoko, who shall be giving us a very lovely details about antimicrobial resistance. I can see that people are actually leaving, so please, I want to mention that for you to get a certificate, attendance is kind of like important. So We'll be taking one. We took one at the beginning, and we'll be taking one now. I'll drop the link. Please fill, and you can, yes, just fill before leaving, please. It's very important so that we can have proper documentation. So just give me a minute to get the link, and I'll send that now. All right, so this is the link, guys. Please take attendance if you're interested in getting a certificate from us. This certificate shall have signatures of the president and the guest speakers. And I think it would be wonderful to add that to your CV. And apart from that, you tend to gain a lot as well. I also noticed some people just joining now. Sadly, we have finished today's symposium, but you can have it ever come tomorrow by 8 p.m. West African time, and we would love to have you. Abdulakim, I don't know if you want to say anything, please. If not, I think we can end the meeting.
There's nothing to say than just to thank everyone for joining us on today's event, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Please encourage your classmates, your friends to please attend. We actually, the conference is not for just us alone. Like, it's something that everybody stands to gain a lot. So please, I'm just encouraging you to please encourage your friends to join. And yes, I'll be ending the meeting soon. Please, as everybody fills the attendance. In case you didn't see the link, I'm sending it again. All right, guys. You have a lovely day. Bye.